Welcome to the Best Business Podcast, the podcast for established marketers, entrepreneurs, and CEOs. The ones who want to join me in my mission to create 200 new multimillionaires who solve world problems with entrepreneurship. If that's you, then this podcast was created to give you access to the tools, training, strategies, and tactics you need to achieve multiple seven-figure profits as soon as possible. This world needs the best business you can build, so please get ready, open your mind, believe you can do this, and let's build a better world together for future generations. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Daryl Urbanski, your host as always, and today we are joined by a very special man, a man who's been recognized with many awards for his accomplishments, Brian Wong. You may recognize his name from being one of Canada's top 20 under 20, one of Business Insider's top 25 under 25 in Silicon Valley, one of Forbes 30 under 30 for 3 years now, one of Mashable's top 5 entrepreneurs to watch, plus being featured on other noteworthy lists such as iMedia 25, AdAge Creativity Top 50, the 30 under 30 in advertising, and 18 most important people in mobile advertising. His company has generated over $10 million while helping everyone around the table, himself, his investors, his employees, partners, and of course, the end mobile users. His company, Kiip, pronounced Kiip, redefines how brands connect with consumers through a rewards platform that targets achievement moments in mobile games and apps. This is done with something called moments-based marketing. Brian believes when it comes to mobile advertising, impressions and click-through rates are old, stale metrics. This innovative approach to mobile marketing creates meaningful engagement between users, developers, and advertisers, and he might be onto something as his company is thriving in an industry where the vast majority are not. His company, Kiip, has been recognized by Forbes as one of the 4 hot online ad companies to put on your watch list, plus the Dow Jones Fast Tech 50, as well as listed on Fast Company's 50 most innovative companies. And as if that wasn't impressive enough, Brian received his Bachelor of Commerce from the University of British Columbia at age 18 after skipping 4 grades between kindergarten and graduating high school. He was also once the youngest person to ever receive venture capital funding, and today he's here to tell us all about the future of mobile advertising and his moments-based marketing, as well as answer questions to important challenges many of you listening might be facing. Things from how to get financing in today's fundraising environment, how to build and scale a sales team, or if you're just starting out, how to get your first customers and some monetization strategies. So Brian, thank you for joining us today. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Daryl.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to have you here. And again, it's a very impressive resume and a great track record, especially for someone who's just kind of getting started. So do you come from a family of entrepreneurs? What's the drive? How did you get pulled into this? Did you always have an entrepreneurial knack? Do you have a mom and dad and grandparents that are entrepreneurs as well?
Yeah, so my parents actually, surprisingly, are my dad's an accountant and my mom is a nurse. But I will share that my dad came from a long line of entrepreneurs as well and actually started his own accounting firm. So there is entrepreneurship in our DNA for sure. And my grandparents, were farmers. My other grandparents had a jewelry business. So, entrepreneurs run in most families, I feel, really when you're just trying to make a living. And I think there's just different definitions of it as it's evolved. And now with the internet, things have kind of gotten to another category, and that's where I believe that I ended up starting. Now, my parents chose to be in their careers because of stability. And when they moved to Canada from Hong Kong, they were trying to find a life that they felt that they would want to raise their kids in as well. And, being a nurse is pretty safe. People aren't going to stop getting sick. And then being an accountant is also pretty safe. People are going to have to pay their taxes. So That's kind of how they thought about it.
So then for you, I guess, how did you get into mobile marketing? Was it always inclined for that? Or, if your parents had businesses and you say like you started yours a different way, how was yours different? Theirs was from stability. Probably, like you said, they just came to a new country. They've got kids. But for you, how has entrepreneurship been different?
Yeah. I think what I realized was my parents gave me a very stable environment to grow up in so that the only thing I had to worry about was really studying and then doing really cool shit, right? Because it's like when you end up being, I feel like sometimes it's as kids of immigrant parents, we we do get pressured into more stable stuff just because of their thinking process around, they came up in an environment that was economically unstable and at another level, right? Right now, economic instability is not the level that they experienced.
Right.
And so we have the ability to go and do really fun things and take risks. That's why we have a stable environment, is to go and do those things. So that's why I decided to jump into it. And mobile marketing wasn't really a thing that I woke up one day when I'm going to do mobile marketing. It was more a confluence of many things that brought me to this point. So I studied marketing in business school. And then I learned how to design when I was younger. At the age of 11, I had basically I got my hands on a copy of Photoshop, and I started to learn how to design on my own. So with design and marketing, naturally, when you start seeing how mobile ads have played out, you get very disappointed, and that's like the understatement of the century. And I said, hey, why don't I how do I improve this? How do I fix this? How do I make it better? And that's what led to the initial impetus for the idea for Kiip.
Got it. Well, that's really cool. And so, again, you've been at this for how many years now with Kiip?
It's been almost 6 years now, actually, 5.5 years.
6 years. So can we talk maybe a bit about the early days and then talk about in the middle and now? Because after 5 years, I mean, a lot of businesses, they don't survive the first 5 years. And if they do, and they're growing really fast. Depending on the industry, a lot of owners sell out. A lot of entrepreneurs are in it to build it and sell it. And so if they've got really good growth 4 or 5 years, they just flip it and go into something else. So I feel like you've kind of probably come through different phases. So can we talk about the beginning a little bit? I'd like to know some of what the challenges were with you, having to hire people older than yourself, securing financing. What was that like? What were some of the biggest challenges you came across in the beginning?
Yes, I think, having been through the super early stage, growth stage, and now later stage, or both are the same in many cases, and for us it is, definitely I feel like I've seen, quite a nice chunk of that cycle. And from the early stage, it's really about making sure that your co-founding unit is solid, and then your first few staff are generalists and can handle pretty much any level of ambiguity, and be comfortable with your entire staff almost turning over in the middle of the life of your company, or at least in the middle stages, so that they can be replaced by people who specialize. And so those are the things that I began to learn. Now, raising money wasn't really massively challenging, as it were, primarily because in 2010, when I first started, it was a very less competitive environment, let's say, less noise. And it was also a totally different fundraising environment. You had angels, a handful of angels, not a lot, and then early stage VCs that were kind of born from the dollars that had been generated from sort of the last boom, and that really wasn't really too much. It was not a lot of people that benefited from it, but there was concentrated pockets of wealth. So anyway, so the savvy ones were like, well, now that we have another downturn, because it was right after 2008 and the crisis there, the early stage investors were savvy enough to put in money, but definitely at valuations that were much more conservative, which I think ended up helping us in the long run, because we have a very reasonably valued company, not like an overvalued one, which we're seeing right now is causing a lot of headache in the industry. So that was sort of very helpful and healthy in the beginning. And I'd say the biggest lessons I've learned is really letting go. When you're an entrepreneur, you want to be so control freaky on everything, and you just need to figure out that your perfect is not the same as other people's perfect. And if you let and empower other people to do their perfect, they will love you and they will work with you and will make sure that the company grows, at least it feels a lot like their own as well. And that's the key.
I love how you said that. So I personally had a goal years and years ago, but I had a goal that I wanted to meet 9 millionaires because I wanted to mentor and rise myself. And one of my first mentors, he said, Daryl, everyone's going to be a beta version of you. And that's kind of what you're just saying here, right? No one in your company is ever going to do it as good as you think it needs to be done. Or, some people might do it better, but everyone's always going to be a beta version of you, and you just have to accept that. So how do you handle that? How do you manage managing a team or expectations, right? When you have something that's important to you and to the company and you have to put that in someone else's hand, is there a system or a process you follow?
Yeah, so I think it's really about the culture underlying everything as the foundation. What does everyone sort of naturally do when a decision needs to be made, for example, or a new idea comes about, or a big project needs to be executed or carried along for a few months, if not a few years. And the way that we've done it is that the company is definitely very numbers driven, very revenue driven, but also very flat and then also very horizontal. Both similar, meaning you can actually move between teams and feel flexible enough that you're not locked into one thing. And I think that's very helpful as well for a lot of the younger people that are on our team. And so I think it's just about what the natural default is for people. There is no set system. There's no form that you submit ideas to, but we do have all hands every 2 weeks. We gather all our offices, make sure that the communication is there. And we also have this thing we call an exchange program. Really is what it is. We can exchange staff between New York and SF or Chicago and LA and New York and LA or whatever, and have people just interact and spend time with other teams for very fixed periods of time. So there's just ways to create those collisions, as Tony Hsieh likes to call them, that leads to these types of creative ideas, but then also allows collaboration to be at its highest level.
Got it. Okay. Well said. Well answered. I like that. So now you even have, because culture is a huge thing, whether it's an athletic team or, again, it's business or it's a volunteer effort. And I feel like I know a little bit, just having done research on you before, that you've got a bit of a unique hiring process unless things have changed. Can you maybe speak to that? Is that part of where you build the culture, is when you bring people in, or, right? Because I imagine once you have a deep
definitely the source.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We're very, very, very peculiar about how we hire. We have sort of like this, it's still the same system where it needs to be unanimous. If there's a single veto, that's a veto. And we also, have different processes for non-engineers and engineers. And we rely pretty much 100% on third-party references. We don't really care about the references you give us, because obviously they'll say glowing things about you. Otherwise, you've clearly messed up somewhere. And then there's also this component of really observing people's ability to hone in on their strengths versus focusing on fixing their weaknesses. So there's questions like, what's your superpower? What do you know you're really good at? And do you focus energy and resources on really polishing and honing in on that rather than focusing energy on fixing the things that you're not good at? And that's what I think at some point in our adulthood we begin to realize, right? Even in school, we don't realize this. We get told, you got a B or a C in math and you got to get better at that. Versus, you're really good at, philosophy or lit or, psychology. Focus on that and then make that your strength. It doesn't have to be formal subjects. For example, my superpower is getting people really excited about stuff, right? That's literally all I do all day long, everywhere, like in interviews like this, to interviewing potential candidates, to sales, to investors, you name it. That's literally all I would do. Now, obviously, there's things that still need to run, and so I have teams that are good at those other things that are complementary to me and to other people that I know have their superpowers and the things that they're not good at, and really making sure that teams are healthy that way.
Now, how did you get to that? Because that's something so many people struggle with, this delegation task. Because you really did hit the nail on the head when entrepreneurs have a control issue. And what you just said, you're like, I'm just really good at getting people excited no matter what I'm doing. And you're like, I got other people to handle other things. Can you, you had to learn that lesson. And I'm sure there's probably iterations of that lesson you go through again and again. But can you speak to that a little bit? Because I don't know. Maybe it's something that can be summarized really easily, just delegate everything else other than what you're good at. But I want to hear more of, the story of how you learned that. Is that something your parents coached you through? Or is that something you learned through trial and error? Did you ever have issues with that? Were you just burnt out, whatever, I'm done, I need people to handle this? Or was it just how did you come to that conclusion and execute on that as well as you have?
Yeah, I think it came to just seeing in the early days why people weren't happy in their roles, why they left In the beginning as a founder and a CEO, you take a lot of this stuff personally, where like people are leaving you or your family, and it's like that. And sometimes you understand the real reasons, and sometimes it's the culture of them wanting to feel like they're contributing and that they have control over their own destinies, and those are the things that are super helpful and really fulfilling people's lives. And that's one component of it. The other is really, as an entrepreneur, you get kicked in the shins so much that at some point you just kind of stop caring about the tiny little, like really unnecessarily, you think it's significant, but it really isn't. You end up figuring out through pattern recognition over time the things that don't matter and the things that do matter, essentially, is what I'm saying. And so if you let people that are very good at taking care of the things on the scale of don't matter as much to moderately matters as much, then you can delegate that properly. And then the scale of like things that matter a ton, especially to your process and to your strategic vision for the company and making the biggest impact with one fell swoop, that's really where you need to focus your energy. And I'm still not that great at it. I think it's a lifelong learning process to know the true Pareto of your life. Where is most of your effort making most impact in the chunk of your time? And that really is the most valuable lesson to learn.
Yeah, I agree. Focus on the significant few versus the trivial many. Got it. Okay. So then, you said the stages were all the same. So there wasn't really a difference for you in the early stages versus the middle and where you are now?
Well, there were always different stages. I mean more like we went through most of those stages and survived and did very well in some and didn't do so well in others. And I think having seen there's various moments in your company where it's a freak out moment. We've had, for me, there's more than I can count now, where when you survive them, you're just like, all right, great. It's like not a big deal. So the one line I always use for entrepreneurs is nothing is ever as terrible as it seems, and nothing is ever as awesome as it seems. So it works both ways. So something catastrophic could occur that you might think is like, oh my God, this is it. But literally it is not. And then you might have a great deal come in where you're like, yeah, I'm like $1 million in like 2 minutes. And, they're going to line our offices with gold, and we're going to get a lifetime supply of tacos. And then that doesn't happen. And so it doesn't matter. Like there's just going to be things that just you stay in that middle. It always is the challenge of moving forward and making sure that you always have the next step, even if you're making it up on the spot. People rely on you as a leader to do that. Many people in times of challenge will be paralyzed, will be stuck, and you just need to be the one that points to that, one sort of stream of light and say that we'll just go there and we'll figure it out. And that's, I think, the most important thing for entrepreneurs to realize that teams are relying on them to do for them.
So you mentioned Pareto principle. I love that concept, and I'd love to hear what you feel are the significant few that you've focused on in your business. Looking back over the last 6 years, could you give 3 to 5 things that you've focused on relentlessly that you think have helped attribute to your success?
I think it's really taking the superpower that I just identified and applying it through the highest impact way. So for me, it's like speaking to large audiences. It's coming up with sort of exponentially valuable ideas to increase revenue streams and partnership efficiency. So our sales orgs within the company, we have 2. One goes after developers to integrate our SDK. The other goes after brands to basically spend money with us. If I can somehow create sort of lighter fluid to accelerate any of those 2, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. The other is also removing obstacles as well. That's similar to accelerating, especially if your engine's running, but there's a barrier in front of you. It doesn't matter if the barrier is not removed, you're burning fuel. So for us, it's really about, for example, my team has literally a Slack thread with me of all the people that they want me to reach out to for them. And it's that simple. It's sometimes as simple as that. And I have a whole list right now. Like I've probably got 30 that came in today. Now, I'm just going to share this, and it doesn't leave this conversation. I'm kidding. Most people know this. But I have an email that looks like it comes from me, which isn't actually me. It's my team.
Right.
And it allows them to reach out to people as the CEO, because sometimes partners have huge egos and just want to talk to the CEO all the time. Mm-hmm. And that just allows them to get through it. I don't care if it's not necessarily my fingers that typed the email, but I would have done the same thing anyway. So there's ways to do that to just make it more efficient. That's just one of many, many, many examples. And that's just more in my life. Now, obviously for them, it's different in what tools they adopt and their processes. And I always encourage them, for example, to think about what I call the third solution. To any challenge, any problem, there's always two very obvious outcomes, right? Mm-hmm. And there's usually a third that requires just a little more creativity, just a little more cunningness, just a little bit more cleverness, and then boom, you just have this super awesome third unicorn solution that just is amazing. And it's with every deal. There is one for every deal. You just need to be a bit more creative about it. And I encourage people to do that, because I think creative thinking, creative problem solving is the key to exponential growth. Mm-hmm. People call it growth hacking. I don't care what it's called. Yeah, it's just being smart.
Yeah. I call it being smart.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, you mentioned that you've got kind of two sales divisions of your team. And scaling sales is where a lot of businesses get stuck. That's almost always a problem with any business, is figuring out how to scale sales. And the issue can be maintaining quality in the sales rep. It can be in not really understanding what the buying motives of your buyers are. Can you speak to that at all as far as building and scaling a sales team or sales in your company?
So my first answer to that would be, you should talk to my CRO, my Chief Revenue Officer, and that's why I hired her. So that's, again, not my specialty, and I'm not good at it. And I know that managing and building sales teams are one of the most challenging things on the planet. It is not easy. Mm-hmm. And I would say in the beginning, it was just picking the right person. And I don't want to, there's no value to people like, oh, yeah, so easier. So no, of course I'll hire the right person. But it's like, what I mean is also to keep in mind tactically with sales teams that incentive structures are so powerful. The reason why people are in sales is to make money at the end of the day. There's no dancing around that topic. As long as you enable them to make the most money. I want my salespeople to be driving around Jaguars and BMWs, you name it, because they're supposed to be killing it. They're supposed to be raking in the dough. And as long as your sales structure enables them to do that, man, the horses run, and it's crazy. So that's one thing that I learned. And you also need to continue to tweak it so that it aligns to your business, because sometimes you might tell them one thing, but if the incentive structures incentivize to do something else, it doesn't matter what you tell them, they'll just revert back to that. Yep. And there is no other way. That's what I'm saying. There is, I'm very opinionated about this. There's no other way. You need to tweak the incentive structures. That's the first. And then the second is, I think, is sales enablement is crucial. They won't always ask you for everything that they need to be the most effective. Sometimes if it's to run in a straight line really fast, they'll do that. But if you tell them that there's actually an escalator beside them or moving walkway that can make them run even faster, you need to tell them that that's where it is, and then they'll go there. So it's still, because they're so efficient at doing one thing, until you tell them about another efficient way, sometimes it doesn't happen on its own. So sales enablement, and this is what happened with one of our best hires was a sales marketing lead, and she essentially just her job literally is just to think every day, what can I create to make my sales team more effective? This is new materials, new ideas, new packaging opportunities, new data, you name it. Videos, sizzle reels, you name it. And as simple as that sounds, sometimes you think of it as pure overhead. In the beginning, for the first week, it might be, but then you'll see the results very quickly. It's quite an amazing thing.
That's a great tip, and I hope the people listening here have a pen and paper handy, as I always recommend, because you're giving it some good stuff. I always keep notes, and I've definitely got a couple of pages of notes here already. So now I wanted to ask about marketing. I wanted to switch it up a little bit. Sales and marketing are often very closely related but different. And I wanted to talk a bit about marketing, because you've got some bold comments out in the public, things like, impressions and click-through rates. Those are stale metrics. And I'm with you. I'm with you in that there's always better. I definitely agree. And I love the concept of moments-based marketing. And I just want to know a bit about your marketing background and how you even came to kind of develop that. Is that even your term? I just haven't heard anyone else mention it. I've seen you publish some articles using that terminology, so I'm assuming it's kind of a Kiip original. But I just love it, especially, again, the way that your platform works. And for people listening, I'll just say it right now, but and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's instead of just trying to push ads on people, you wait for an opportune moment to reward them. And so my understanding is, like, if I got my phone and I run, at the end of my run, when I finish my run, as a reward, your app will pop up like some sort of bonus or integrate with their app or whatever. I'll get some ad, but it'll be an ad for like, hey, did you just have a great run? Click here to get your discount on, a Subway sub or something like that. Am I close to it? Is that correct?
100%. And the rewards I would add are serendipitous. You don't know when they're going to be rewarded. It's always a surprise and delight, which is really designed to keep the original behavior organic, but also not make it so that you're only doing it for the reward, which sometimes happens depending on the type of personality. Now,
so you're trying to randomize the Pavlov effect.
That's basically it, and the technical term is variable ratio rewards, and then there's the a fixed ratio where variable, and that's our positive intermittent reinforcement. All these things are part of it, and they're all psychology terms. It's so very psychology-driven model. Now, when you think about moments, so yes, it is a Kiip original. We believe that using a term that is both in the interests of the consumer and the publisher and the advertiser was crucial. This is one of those industries where vernacular truly does matter. I think what happens is when you use words that are invented purely by an advertiser, like GRPs and TRPs, and then impressions, the consumer doesn't give a hoot about impression. Like, people don't go, oh, wow, I just got an impression of an ad. Whoa. That doesn't happen. But they do experience life in moments. And moments mean something to consumers. So to the extent in which you can help enable and align your advertising to that, you win. And that was that value chain of alignment that we weren't seeing. There was a huge disconnect between the advertiser and the consumer. It was more, we want you to see this, so we're just going to jam it down your throats. We don't care if you care. That's what's going to happen. Here's how it works. And, oh, you don't expect content for free, do you? Like, how do you expect it to be free all the time? Well, we got to shove these ads down your throat. This is not how life should work. It should always be a win-win. And that's what we were trying to create with this model. And I'm very happy that we've been able to accomplish it with, the 700 some odd brands that we work with today.
That's awesome. Yeah, okay. I like what you said. Marketing should always be a win-win. And I really like that idea because I think that, there's a lot of just people out there peddling snake oil and stuff like that. They give marketing a bad name when I actually think it's a really noble trade to be in because, if you have a cure for arthritis, you should be able to go out there and advertise and find all the people that you can help and tell them about your product or service. So I really like that's one thing that I really, really do like about what you're talking about, how it's bringing kind of the fun back to it and still helping people at the same time. So that's kind of cool as well. What have been some of the big challenges that you faced? Being like, there's a saying, the pioneers get the arrows, the settlers get the land. You're a bit of a pioneer. And so what have some of the challenges and arrows that you've had to just take or overcome and deal with in, really changing the game in your industry?
I think a lot of it was helped by the fact that I came in without knowing much. And in this case, ignorance is bliss. And especially if you didn't know how hard it was going to be, then you're less deterred from doing it. So that was pretty much what happened. And it was extraordinarily challenging. And it still is. I mean, like, every day I still have conversations where I'm pretty much head smacking all the time. I'm just like, why are they even still talking about this? But it's also having an open mind that not everyone thinks like this. And I think that's one thing that I think entrepreneurs sometimes forget. And when they work with big companies is we go, well, why are they not more innovative? Why are they not more nimble? Man, big companies suck. They're so slow in how they move. Well, first of all, they do have a $60 billion ship they need to move, which usually will take a little longer than expected. It's kind of expected.
Right, you got to turn that.
And shouldn't you be aligning yourself to the $60 billion ship because they're going to give you some of that $60 billion? And that's usually that's how we think about it. Like, we're not trying to make the brands change themselves radically for us. We don't expect that, nor do we want that necessarily. We want to help them be the most effective at what they do, which in some companies' cases is, making, tacos and producing soft drinks and not being a nimble mobile marketer, right? And so if you can help them, great, and they'll love you. And that's why it's like you need to be the company that they're the easiest to spend money on to help accomplish their goals the fastest. And it's the same principle for everything from infomercials and why we buy crazy, fun, cool products that we think will do that. And then sometimes it actually once in a while surprises you and actually does that, but obviously with minus the sleaze factor. So it's like there's just so many things that come with just being understanding of who you're working with. This is classic sales that I think most people just don't have a good grasp on.
I love what you mentioned here, and I want to just focus on it for a second, where you talked about meeting them where they're at. And I think that's really important because I think a lot of, depending on the industry, because we've got a bit of a wide audience, but a lot of them tend to be online marketers or information marketers. But I think there's just a lot of self-directed marketing in that sense versus, like, for you, you're really coming at it from your client's perspective. And I think, and that's something that's really good on two levels. So I said that even in your intro in the bio, where you're helping everyone at the table, which is language you use. You gave me that language yourself before this interview. I think that's a really important thing, to be able to see it from the person on their phone that's getting the ads to even the company, and to try to design it around that. I think that's a really powerful thing. I just met you. I don't know your company very well, but I feel like just having that on the forefront of your mind, basically your two customers, just trying to meet them where they're at. I think that's just so important, and it's just an easy thing to glaze over. But I wanted to stop for a second and just highlight that, because there's a lot of depth that goes into that. There's a lot of reflection. There's a lot of research. There's a lot of trial and error and testing. But there's also kind of, and honestly for a young guy, a lot of selflessness to be able to do that. Because especially, and I don't know what your life has been like, but I know, at least for myself, when I first started, having some success, you have to be careful it doesn't get to your head. You don't have to be careful you don't start assuming you know what's best. And so just hearing you say that, and again, just knowing what I know about your company, I think that's something for the listeners want to flesh out, because for them, they need to make sure that they're thinking about that, because that's a really important thing. And I loved what you said about being the easiest to do business with. That's a huge thing. That's like why one-click upsells work so well, or why Amazon clicks your credit card. That way all you have to do is put in your password and click 3 buttons, and they've charged you again. That whole concept came from making doing business with you easier. And I just don't know if there can be an overemphasis on that making doing business with you easier for your client in every way, shape, and form. That's a really good one. What do you think has been one of your biggest challenges of your career, like overall, like in entirety? Having been the youngest, having come from where you got venture capital money, so people were kind of snarking at you, right? Because, geez, people believe in his idea. That guy's got it easy, right? Like, what do you think's been one of some of the biggest challenges for you to overcome? And not necessarily personally, but just to grow a company that's growing, that's, like you said, it's increasing in valuation, it's stable, it's pushing the envelope of where the industry is going. What's been like the single biggest challenge for you?
I think there's classic challenges that everyone always experiences that I just don't really look at as challenges. I always look at them as just a next milestone, right? And these are things that I don't really get hung up on. And any challenge or perceived failure or mistake is always a huge learning opportunity. And that's just part of what makes doing this so fun. If it wasn't challenging, then it'd just be like boring. It's like going down a ski hill and not having moguls. And I'm like very excited when moguls appear, because I'm like, yeah, I get to like do stuff, Otherwise, it's just it's just boring. You just fall asleep.
Right.
So that's just what makes it exciting. And I think as a young entrepreneur, you take what people think is your weakness and you just make it your biggest strength. Being young is actually your biggest strength. You're always able to learn. You're allowed to ask questions all the time. You're expected to be innovative. You're full of energy. People want to be around you. This is the type of thing that makes being young great. And you admit to people that, yeah, maybe I haven't been in this industry for 50 years, so I'd love to learn from you too. And you tell someone who's been in the industry for 50 years that you want to learn from them, they're not going to go, I don't like you because you want to learn from me. They're going to want to learn from you.
Of course.
So.
Got it.
Simple.
Got it. Okay. So what advice would you give to someone who's got an idea, they think they've got a product or minimum viable product anyways that will be of benefit to the world, and they're just not even sure, like, how do I get my first customer? How do I start? Do you have any advice for anyone who's just starting out, or advice? Yeah.
Do stuff like email potential customers. Like my favorite, this is just because it comes so naturally now. I understand that it isn't the most easiest or obvious thing in the beginning for new people who are doing it. They're new, but people will go, well, I don't know if my product is going to be something that people want, and who might buy it? I'm like, well, just find 10 potential customers and ask them if they would want to buy something like this.
Right,
It's not that hard. Just literally email them. And what's the worst that could happen? They don't respond to you? Well, they weren't going to respond to you in the first place anyways if you didn't email them. So just ask them, okay, I have a product. And you don't have to tell them if it's real or not. Just say that, we have this product. It helps you do these things. And, would you be interested in taking a meeting? I'd love to brainstorm with you. You'd be one of our first few customers. We want to co-develop this with you. You will then have your fingerprints all over it, and the product will work better for you. And then they'll go, no one will say no to that, basically. This has happened for products that has been sold into Kiip as buyers. So we have products, of course, we use to help our teams. Perfect examples is software that my admin uses it's actually called, I'll promote them. They're called Esper, ESPER. They came to us very early on. They're like, hey, Andrew, the guy started, he's Brian, we have this early software we want to test out that is basically going to replace admin. I was like, no, I already have one. And he's like, well, okay, maybe we can help use the software to make her more efficient. I was like, that's a great idea. And why don't we build it together? So here's all the challenges that we have. Here's all the challenges that she has. You guys should spend some time one-on-one. And then now they basically built a product that's like designed for her. And we're paying them now every month. It's awesome. And so and that product wasn't even real when we first met him. Now it's real. So it's fantastic. This is the best thing.
Yeah. No, I love it. Necessity is the mother of invention. Now, a couple other questions. Things like multitasking. Do you think that as an entrepreneur you can grow or really be invested in more than one business project at a time?
No.
How about
I will add an asterisk before people throw tomatoes at me. I think that there's the ability to multitask and run businesses as long as you have the right leadership in those places to essentially just take on all the big things. But for you to truly fool yourself into thinking that you're truly running multiple businesses, you're just fooling yourself, right? You're just lying to yourself. So, I'm not a fan of the fact that Jack Dorsey is the CEO of two companies, because it is not truly possible for him to do the best he can do for both companies. He can do what he can do for both companies, but he cannot do the best that he can do. So those types of things are situations that create regret. And I'll be honest, it's because you regret when you know that you didn't put your all into making something successful. And you don't want to be that guy at the end of the whole thing. So as long as you know you put your best and your all and what you humanly could have done for this, you will walk away with no regrets. And that's the most important thing for entrepreneurs to keep in mind.
And I want to ask you about kind of work-life balance, because there's a lot of different people that have different opinions out there. I know what I believe and what I've been told, and I know things other people have said, and I know there's popular books out there as well. But I want to know your opinion as far as work-life balance, and especially when you're trying to get something where it's up and running. Maybe now it's possible for you to have more since you've been at it for 6 years and you've got a team built around you. But I think the first 3 years or so, I just want to hear you speak to that. If someone has a business, and it's a weekend business or an evening business, can you just speak to what kind of work ethic you think is required? Can you delegate everything? I mean, maybe it just comes back to what you just said with having the right leadership in place. But what do you think about that? what it takes to get a company
Yeah,
off the ground.
I think first of all, if you make, I'm going to do the cliche answer. If you make work feel like fun and play, then you're not working all day, and it's not work-life balance. This is life balance, and that's the first answer. But to those who think that I'm just smoking just crack and this has to be like he's just high on something and doesn't realize that there's real life here for people, I can address that too, which is, make sure you take. I love the concept of micro vacations, which is essentially like 3 days where you literally leave your phone behind, disconnect, do something that is essentially effectively putting you in a meditative state. Now, for me, my version of this is skiing, because when you're skiing, you cannot do emails or think about work, even, because if you do, you could die. You basically could die. Yeah, it's pretty simple. So that's one way to do it. That's why some people do. That's why so many entrepreneurs do things like kiteboarding and surfing and golfing is a little harder.
I'm with
no
you.
real life or death there. But that's mainly the reason. So I recommend you're figuring out what your micro vacation mode looks like and build your company to the point where you can take 3 days off and things aren't exploding. And that's also an important milestone as well.
Yeah, I like that. And the reason why I wanted to ask is because, there's the book, the 4-Hour Work Week. There's a lot of people that are touting you have to have work-life balance. But then you have other guys like Elon Musk who's like, you need to work every single waking second of every day. Like, that's just what you need to do. And if you put in a 100-hour work week and your competitors put in a 50-hour work week, then in 6 months you'll have accomplished twice what they're capable of. And he's very matter-of-factly. And I've heard a number of other people about that as well. But there's a lot of people out there who are doing successful in business that aren't necessarily investing.
By the way, Elon is allowed to say whatever he wants. And everyone will basically cannot question it. That's why, the goal in life is to get to the point where you are at the level of an Elon, and then say that you work 3 minutes a day, and everyone will think that that's the way to do it. So there's really no right answer.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, I agree. But I was just curious what your thought was. So, do you have any favorite books that you've read that really helped you or you thought would be really inspiring and insightful for the audience? If they're, again, trying to figure out how to build a company, how to manage teams, how to grow a sales team, how to figure out the product, the product promotion prospect matrix. I know I butchered that, but.
Yeah, I think there's some classic books that everyone has probably read in business school or something similar. You can just find a whole list of them, like the Good to Greats of the world and things like that. But, I think beyond that, there's really a daily book that you should attempt to fill your head with, which is just of interesting cases of creativity and business models that you can glean from just, making sure you're in touch with the news. Now, keep in mind that a lot of this stuff could be sensationalized, could not actually be true. But as long as you're inspired and you have multiple data points, you then know that this is how some other companies are doing it. So that's why I encourage sometimes being aware, not of what your direct competition is doing, but with the companies that are somewhat parallel to what you're doing. That's important to make sure you can keep an eye on. And then just being inspired by creativity overall through, things like, as funny as it sounds, it's like I love packaging and I love looking at the way that, there's this blog called The Die Line. It's just amazing. It's so addictive. You just basically get to see the most creative packaging. And I just think that it's fun to look at other areas like architecture, like arts, like modern art, sculptures, statues, cultural arts, I was in Egypt over the New Year's, and you just literally just get inspired by so many random things that you then can use those data points to be creative on your own. And if you don't have those data points, you can't even be creative. So that's why I encourage people to go out there and just see the world. That's one big way to do that.
The traveling is huge. Traveling and meeting others and shared experiences. Now,
it's the book of life and the book of travel that you should be reading.
So now, do you see, like you said earlier in our interview, that you have a lot of moments in a day where you're slapping your face because you're like, why are people still talking about this, or why haven't they figured that out? There are a lot of mistakes you see clients and other entrepreneurs making, like really simple things that I don't know why they just don't not do that.
Yeah, I think it's just making sure that you don't make the same mistake twice. It's okay to make mistakes as long as you don't make them twice. That's basically it. And then the other is, it's, being, I'd say another is like assuming that you are the only one that can really move the needle on certain things, meaning don't rely on others to do things for you all the time. Like, I always find that sometimes the classic mistake is, well, they're going to get back to me. Well, they're not. And you need to email them again. And you need to be, and there's a fine line between aggression and diligence. And I think being diligent is crucial.
I like that. I had a recent discussion today about project management, and I was for having two people do the same task because it was part of the critical path. And the debate was, no, that's silly because, first people's feelings might be hurt, might have to, they feel like they're wasting their time doing something someone else is doing. But I think what you said, and maybe you would side with them, but I think from what you just said, it's like there is a fine line between being aggressive versus being diligent. And for that project, it was way more important that task get done and make sure it's done on time and right. And it was already being redone because it hadn't been done right the first time. So it was more of like a focus like that. So I just like how you mentioned that it's easy to say so-and-so is going to handle it. But I think sometimes, like you said, you need to step in and say, do it again or double up and not be afraid of just taking action and making things happen. So well said. Now, do you feel that you've had any habits? I asked you about kind of like decisions. I asked you about what things focus. That's right, points of focus that you think helped you be successful. But what about habits? Do you have a habit? I mean, a lot has come out of this interview already. So we talked about traveling, from learning, from not making the same mistake twice. We also talked about focusing on your superpower and helping you remove obstacles. Talked about hiring the right people. We also talked about, what else we talked about? The culture in your company. Do you have any other like habits, whether they're day-to-day habits or weekly or monthly or yearly habits that you feel have really helped you manage the challenges you've been faced with?
I think it's just being responsive, being energetic consistently, being just in front of your team and being available, be like just all the general things that come with just trying to be a good person is habitually important. And then the more you do it, and the more tolerant you are, the more people will just begin to characterize you as such, and it begins to develop your personality and your character for them. So there's no specific habits. My habits are intentionally supposed to change as well. If you just have the same thing all the time, then you just stay stale. So I think as part of being, fresh about what you do, which is important as well.
Now, what about the future of mobile marketing? Where do you think it's going? Where do you think, we already talked about moments-based marketing. Can you speak to what you see? Just, again, being at the forefront of your industry and, again, being younger. That's another advantage that you have against their competitors, is that they're very detached from the technology where you kind of grew up immersed in it. Where do you see things going in the next 5 to 10 years? Any predictions?
I wouldn't know in 10 years. In 5, I will say that there will not be any mobile marketing. It's just marketing. And then I would say that the way that consumers will expect experiences will be delivered intelligently. So this is the combination of AI and services and marketing. I think those things will come together. As in, there will not be dumb marketing. It'll all be enabled, smart, and connected, which is just like a no-brainer. So those things are going to be happening. And then I think that the consumers' behaviors are really going to stay pretty similar. There's really no massive change. It's like when you look at Jeff Bezos once said, it's like instead of looking at what changes, why don't you look at what will not change? For example, consumers aren't going to want things more expensive and to arrive slower.
Right.
Those things aren't going to change. So as long as you know the constants, you'll be able to survive as well as thrive in those very long-term strategic planning processes.
Now, you mentioned that too. That was something you brought up before the interview a couple of weeks back about people focusing on the short term too much. Is that something that you see a lot of your peers doing? A lot of other people you talked about?
They have to for their business model. So if you're looking at an arbitrage business model, you have to think short term. But if you want to build something that has impact long term, you have to think about metrics that go beyond 6 months.
So what kind of metrics are those?
For me, it's moments, and it's in the bottom line, it's purchases. What are people buying, and will they buy off of your marketing prowess? So that's sort of the crucial point here.
Now, this is more, I guess, because I'm just interested. I know before that there was a surge in mobile traffic, but no one was buying off their mobile phones. This is back a couple of years ago, a few years ago probably. Now we know more and more people are buying from their mobiles. As far as I know, and I don't have any real data to pull from, but as far as I know, the last time I did check, the purchases were still predominantly coming from desktop computers versus mobiles and tablets. Is there certain industries or types of products that lend themselves to mobile marketing or to being sold directly via like your mobile device?
Yeah, I think every industry is doing this. And I think one big area of investment that this is happening is actually in payments, which is actually the guy that's waiting for me to meet him right now, which is a fellow from Amex. And there's sort of this dynamic of the plastic card disappearing and is going to need some revitalization where you would actually care about using your Amex to pay for something if you don't even see it. That's going to be very crucial as we think about how mobile interacts with the world. And I think mobile and payments we could spend hours talking about, but unfortunately we don't have that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I know in Kenya they've got that where you can send money from your phone to your friends. And we see that in a lot of developing countries. But I'm just curious about, are there any industries that are easier, that lend themselves? Are people, I guess what I want to ask is, how do you sell over a mobile phone? People know how to sell over a computer or laptop, a desktop or laptop. But well, I guess it's moments-based marketing. I was going to say, what are people lacking when they're trying to sell over a cell phone? What is it that makes it more difficult? Is it because the screen is smaller, so you can only convey less information? Is it because you can't have a video playing and the page visible at the same time? I was just curious what your opinion was on that and how that's going to evolve and change. I mean, Amazon, you see something you like, you click buy, and at least from I know, and I've surveyed just mostly my friends, but not a lot of people are first-time Amazon buyers via their mobile. They buy first time on their desktop, and then they'll rebuy stuff because they just log in and click a couple buttons. Do you have any input on that? Any insight? Something that it's okay if that's
no,
not really...
I don't. I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. That area for me is not the central area of my expertise. It'll still be on moments and how people convert.
Was there anything I should have asked you, Brian, that I didn't ask you?
No, I think we've covered a lot, actually. I think it's good that I was able to share my personal story, some of the tips around just being an operating entrepreneur for 6 years almost now. And I really hope the audience understands that there's so many easy things, tweaks, cheats almost that you can implement that you don't really have to do a lot of changing in your habits to really be that much more successful.
Love it. I love it. So, Brian, if people want to get in touch with you, they want to reach out, they want to ask you some questions, they want to get engaged, I know we've got your site. There's Kiip, Kiip.me, Kiip.me. Is there any other contact info? I know you got a book coming out. What's the URL?
Yeah, the URL to sign up for updates is brianiswritingabook.com. Pretty simple. And my Twitter handle is Brian_Wong, and it's pretty easy to get a hold of me there.
Perfect. Well, Brian, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing your experience and knowledge and wisdom with the audience, and I just wish you all sorts of success in the future.
Thanks, Daryl. Really, really appreciate it.
You've reached the end of our interview. Now, first, let me thank you for listening. I appreciate and respect you more than you'll ever know. And now I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. First, what 3 lessons did you just learn? What 3 aha moments just jumped out at you? Second, what can you implement for yourself and your business in the next 24 hours? Third, what can you give to someone else to help you with, or give to them to just do it for you? Whatever it is, remember taking action is the secret sauce to results. Now, if you think this interview would be helpful for a friend, please give them a link to it. It'll help them and it'll help me too. I'd also like to invite you to help me find out more about the challenges you're facing, your dreams, your goals, and how I can help you overcome what's holding you back. We both do better when we know better, and your success is my success. So please reach out and interact. You can visit our website, bestbusinesscoach.ca for Canada or California, where I'm from and where I'm living. You're welcome to also try out one of our paid programs. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and pretty much every other social media channel you can think of. You should also subscribe to the podcast, and if you're enjoying them, please leave us a nice review. It really helps. That's all for now. Once again, thank you. Take care of yourself, and remember, the world needs the best business you can build. And I believe in you.